All right, welcome back, guys. This is Module 5, the due diligence and long analysis phase of purchasing a fix and flip property, and the things that you need to look out for and pay attention to, the things you need to do during this process to make sure that this is a property that you want to buy as a fix and flip project. So, I'm excited to dive in. We've got a lot of really good content for you. You are going to want to review the off-market deals on tap class, specifically the long analysis section that we talk about, because that's going to go into more information in general on the things that you need to be aware of during this process. But we're going to talk about just the specifics to fix and flip in this module. So let's dive in. Now, just like with every module, I got to share my disclosure. I'm not a licensed attorney, accountant, financial advisor, a broker, an agent, or any other licensed individual. I'm a student just like you. I'm a successful real estate investor, and I've developed a lot of really cool systems that make this simple and scalable and limit the risk. And I want to share those with you. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. But let's go ahead and dive in. Like I said, you're going to want to review the long analysis section from the off-market deals on tap class in addition to this module. The long analysis phase and the due diligence phase are synonymous. They are the same phase. Long analysis is what you do during your due diligence. So let's just take a second and talk about the difference between those two things. Due diligence is usually what your real estate purchase contract refers to this phase as. So your due diligence is your contractual right to go in and inspect the property to make sure it's what you're expecting to buy. And then if there are any changes to the contract based on your findings from your due diligence, you can renegotiate at that point. Long analysis is the process of going through that inspection. So they are synonymous. We're going to use them interchangeably, both in the off-market deals on tap class as well as the fix and flip course that we're in right now. So let's talk about that. Now, just like we talked about in the last section, the low stress formula is putting aces in their places and hiring professionals to do what they do best rather than you, the amateur, going and trying to do their job for them. And that applies to the inspection as well. Always hire a professional inspector. They are way better and way more equipped than you are and way more experienced than you are. You know, they do this all day, every day. They've inspected hundreds of homes this month. Whereas you might be doing it for the first time. So they're going to bring their experience, their knowledge, their equipment, their everything to the table that you don't have, and it's only going to cost you a few $100. So be willing to do it. Just do it. Like this is not negotiable. Just do it every single time. So as you bring in an inspector, I want to take the next several slides to talk about what you need to have that the instructions you need to give the inspector, and then what you need to do after you receive that inspection report. So if you think, remember, back to the aces in their places, if you think hiring a professional is expensive, try hiring an amateur. And in this case, that's you, right? Areas of focus for an inspection. These are the standard areas of focus: electrical, foundation, plumbing, asbestos, lead paint, and structure, right? Which would include the roof. So meth is something that in some areas is standard on an inspection, and in some areas is an add-on. I would do it anyway because a meth house is something that if you find that problem up front can save you a lot of money and even make you even more money. But if you don't look for it and you end up having it and your buyer does an inspection after you spent all the money on the remodel, your buyer does an inspection and finds meth, well, then you got a problem because you got to undo a lot of the work that you did to clean up the meth, and it's going to cost you a whole lot. So just be prepared up front. Make sure that you have your inspector looking for meth in those properties as well as all of the standard stuff that they look for. Now, you must know what repair items pay off and what should be avoided. Stick to the system. We're going to talk about this in a future module. When we get into the module that discusses the 5 things, then that's the system. Those are the things that we are willing to spend money on to force appreciation in the home. Everything else we try to avoid. So some of the items that come back on the inspection aren't going to be important. Some of the items that come back on the inspection are going to be very important, right? And so just after watching this class, you're going to have to kind of connect the dots and put it all together and understand, okay, and this varies sometimes project to project, but you're going to need to look at it and say, okay, what are the things that we absolutely have to fix? And what are the things that we can put a Band-Aid on? And then what are the things that we can ignore? right? So know that as you're getting your inspection report back. Now, remember the right-hand rule. In addition to hiring a professional, you're also going to want to do your own inspection. As you're walking through and doing the right-hand rule, which we've talked about in previous modules in this course, you're also going to want to look at windows. Look for cracks in the sheetrock next to the windows or in the plaster next to the windows. That cracks in the windows, specifically in the walls next to the windows, but also in the panes, the glass panes in the windows, could be a number of things. Cracks in the walls next to the windows usually mean foundation problems. Cracks in the panes just mean, a lot of times that just means that you're going to have to replace the window. But either way, that can be, those are expenses. And a foundation issue is usually an expensive fix. So be aware of those things. Those are the kind of the indicators. And the reason that we look at the windows and we look around the windows for those cracks indicating foundation problems is when a foundation sinks in a certain area of the home and becomes uneven with the rest of the foundation, it causes stress on the rest of the structure. Well, the weakest point in a wall is where there's a giant hole, right? And that is for a window or a door. So as you're looking at windows and doors, if there's cracks in the sheetrock coming off of those openings for the windows or doors, that a lot of times can signify a foundation issue. Look at the ceilings. Look for water spots. That's gonna indicate either a plumbing issue or a roof issue. Look at the plugs. If they're 2-prong plugs in the U.S., then that means that you're gonna have to you're gonna have an expense updating the electrical. 3-prong plugs don't necessarily mean that you won't have any electrical expense, but it usually means, not in every case, but usually means that the electrical has been updated. Now, as you're looking around, you may see a mixture of 2 prongs and 3 prongs. If you see even one 2-prong plug in an outlet, you're going to have to update the electrical. So be aware of that, right? Just because there are 3-prong plugs in the house, but you see a couple or one 2-prong plug, doesn't mean that you're in the clear. It just means that they've used 3-prong plugs without grounding it, which is not a good thing. So, any presence of 2-prong electrical outlet receptacles in the house usually signifies a fairly large expense in updating the electrical. Be aware of that. And that's something that you can point out to the professional that you hire. Now, like I've said over and over and over again, hire a professional inspector. Talk to a number of inspectors. Now, just like we talked about in the last module, it's important to have those relationships in place. And I like using the same people over and over again. Sometimes it takes going through a few professionals to find the one that I work the best with, and that's okay. But once I find that person, I like to be loyal to that person because it's going to pay off for me in the long run because they get used to my systems, they get used to the way that I work, and you just start having to communicate less with that person. They already know what you want after doing several deals with them. So you may go through a number of inspectors to find the one that you really like, but once you find that one, stick with them. Question them about everything. What are they looking for? And then a bullet point, I got ahead of myself. Once you find that good one, use them as much as possible. Relationships are key, right? Okay. Next issue on inspection. Watch for grade issues. Now, what I mean by grade is that's the landscaping. That's the yard. If the yard slants back towards the house, you're going to have water issues because when rain falls, if the grade of the yard slopes back towards the house, that water is going to drain to the lowest point. It will slide back towards the house and get into the basement. You do not want that. That's a grade issue. What you want is properties where the grade of the yard is highest where the house is and slopes away from the house. Okay, so watch for those grade issues. Count the layer of shingles. That's going to be important. Like I said in the red flag section, you're gonna, building code in your area may only allow for 1, 2, or 3 layers of shingles. You need to be aware of that. Be aware of what the code is in the area that you're working in, because if you need to add a layer of shingles, or if somebody stepped outside of code and added too many layers of shingles, it's your responsibility to fix it. right? So that should show up in your inspection report. Exterior siding. Make sure the siding not only makes the house beautiful, and when we're talking about siding, we're not just talking about aluminum or vinyl siding, we're also talking about stucco, about wood siding, about brick, any material that could be used on the outside of the house. You need to make sure that it's in good condition, because in addition to making the house look beautiful, it also has a secondary job of keeping moisture and elements out of the house, right? The plywood that's underneath the siding is not enough to keep those elements out of the house. The siding is usually designed with that job in mind. So make sure that it looks good, that there's no cracks, that there's no breakage. That's going to be important. And if there is, you need to be aware that that's something that you're going to have to fix in your fix and flip process. Look at the exterior electrical. Is it free from trees? Is it free from telephone and cable lines? Look for your power meter. Usually there's a power meter on the outside of the house where the power comes from the outside and is transferred to the inside so that you have power inside the house. Look for that meter, know where it is, and then make sure to pay attention to that section of your inspection report to verify that it's up to code and that you're not going to have to do any work there. Replacing electrical meters on the outside of your property is expensive, so it's an expense that you're going to need to calculate if it's out of code, and the inspector will be able to tell you that. Look at the electrical panel on the inside of the house. Look for 200 amp electrical panels; those are good. Look for additional expansion slots inside of that electrical panel. We've talked about this before. That's what you want. If an electrical panel is full, it really limits what you're able to do with that house. You're not going to be able to add any electrical or move any electrical. You're just going to kind of have to leave that as is. Now, on a project where you're just doing carpet, paint, and cabinets, or maybe just carpet and paint, that's okay. That's not a big deal. But if you're going to do more than that, if you're going to add walls, take walls down, add bedrooms, add bathrooms, you need those expansion slots. You're going to need at least a few of them in the existing electrical panel, or that's going to be an additional expense to replace that electrical panel. Is there a fuse box? So instead of a 200 amp electrical panel, is there a fuse box instead, right? That has little glass fuses in it. If that's the case, it has to be replaced. Those are no longer allowed. That's not to code anymore. Also, 100 amp service boxes with no shutoff, with no main switch, needs to be replaced. Those are not to code. No more expansion slots. The panel may be overloaded, so you may need to look at replacing the panel, if that's the case. If you've only got black and white wires in the house and there's no ground, you may have to rewire the whole house. That can be expensive. You want to make sure that you're going to be aware of that if you're going to take that on. Aluminum wiring is a fire hazard, so you may need to rewire the entire house if that's the case. So pay attention to the electrical portion of the inspection report, because it will tell you all of these things. Also, the inspector, if they're good, will let you know, hey, you got aluminum wiring, definitely recommend rewiring. And the best inspectors that I've worked with give you kind of a scale of, the one I work with now gives me a green, yellow, or red. Green means we're good to go, everything looks good. Yellow means you might want to think about fixing or replacing this, and red means you're going to absolutely have to replace this because it's a hazard, right? So pay attention to that stuff on the inspection report. In the plumbing section, galvanized pipes. Turn on at least 5 plumbing fixtures in the house to make sure the pressure stays up. Galvanized pipes tend to rust over long periods of time and will restrict the flow of water. So if you can turn on 5 plumbing fixtures without affecting the water pressure, then you're probably good. You probably don't have galvanized pipe. And you probably have either the copper pipe or PEX, which is what's used a lot now. Also pay attention to your inspection report, because your inspector, if they're good, will be looking for those same things. Cast iron stacks and drains need to be replaced. So if you've got cast iron, current building code looks for ABS, which is the black plastic for your sewage drain. But cast iron is what was used in the 40s and 50s and 60s and even before that. Those things are going to need to be replaced if that's the case, because cast iron has a tendency to corrode. You want to use ABS because it does not corrode. Test all of your drains. Make sure that all of the plumbing drains as it should. Look for cracks, leaks, and corrosion in plumbing. fill sinks, flush toilets, run showers, fill tubs, run faucets. Make sure all that stuff's working right, because plumbing can be a huge issue, and a huge cost. So you want to just be aware at this stage of the game. You want to be aware of whether you're going to have to incur those costs or not. Now, look at the hot water heater. Make sure the temperature pressure relief valve has a discharge pipe for safety. So it'll look like a little valve with a pipe coming off of it that leads to a drain. You want to make sure that's in place, because if it gets too hot or it overfills, it's got a safety mechanism. That having that pipe there means that it has a safety mechanism for relief, so that your water heater doesn't explode. Because that thing, man, water heaters it can be like a bomb. You want to see what that looks like? Just look it up on YouTube. If a water heater explodes. So we don't want to deal with any of that, right? Make sure that it has a pipe for drainage and safety in case it overfills or overheats. And then replace any water heater that's more than 5 years old. The foundation. This is important. Foundations are very, very, very expensive to fix. So make sure that your inspector is looking at the foundations. Now, some of the things that you can do as you're walking around a property, just quick little glances to see if there's foundation issues. Look, if the house is made of brick, if it's got a brick exterior, look for patterns in the brick where the brick has started to separate. Usually you'll see what's called a Z pattern, where you've got a big long crack that kind of Z's down the bricks, where the sections of brick are starting to separate from each other. Often that can mean foundation issues. Also, on the inside of the house, look for cracks around the opening in the sheetrock, like we talked about. That can indicate those are the weakest areas of a wall, is where the hole is for a window or a door. So that's where cracks are going to appear first if you've got foundation shift. So kind of pay attention to those things, and then be sure to review your inspector's analysis of the foundation once you get the inspection report back. Windows, when in doubt, replace it. Look for cracks, look for rust or moisture inside the panes. Some higher end demographics will require vinyl double paned or triple paned windows. So my rule of thumb is, if it's single pane, it's got to be replaced. If it's aluminum, I'm okay with that in the low end demographics, but mid-range and high end, I replace with double paned vinyl, or in the high end, if it's very high end, sometimes triple paned vinyl. You should be doing a meth inspection on the house, like we talked about. Talk to the county health department and a licensed meth remediation expert to square away your numbers. Meth is not as scary as you might think. As a fix and flipper, we actually kind of like it, because it gives us some negotiation to go back in and make more money on the property when we're purchasing it. We can purchase it at a lower price because it's contaminated with meth. And if you're smart, you not only negotiate the price lower by the amount of the repair, but also I usually go double or more the amount of the repair, because then that puts some money back into my profit margin for having to deal with that problem in the first place. So lead-based paint is important. Lead-based paint is not legal anywhere in the U.S., and you are responsible to make sure that the house does not have lead-based paint if you're going to be buying it. Older houses in particular, any house that it was built in the 60s or in the 1960s or earlier, has a high chance of having lead-based paint on it. It's not something to cancel the contract over, but it is going to cost you some money to remediate. So make sure you're aware of that. Talk to experts, talk to your contractors. Usually they have relationships or the ability themselves to remediate and replace lead-based paint. Check for radon. Always opt for the radon test from your inspector. It usually costs less than $1,000 to remediate if there is an issue. And usually the test only costs $100 or $200 from what I've seen. That may vary from area to area, but usually the remediation is less than $1,000. You just don't want to be caught holding the bag on that. Now, any of these issues that come back in inspection, you can go back to the person you're purchasing the home from, the seller, and you can say, "Hey, look, we found radon in your house, or we found meth in your house, or we found out that your house has foundation issues. We didn't know that when we first made our offer, so we've got, if we still want the place, but obviously that's going to be more cost for us to fix. So this is the new number." right? And if you're able to explain why you're lowering the price based on the problems that you found, usually people are pretty understanding about that, right? Soil issues. That's something that it's going to vary area to area. If you're in an area where you know that there's soil issues, have your inspector test for it. If you have no idea, have your inspector test for it. It's something that can create a problem on the sale side of the home, so you want to make sure that you cover that when you're buying it. Now, in addition to the inspection report, an important document that we look at during the long analysis phase and the due diligence phase are the seller's disclosures. Seller's disclosures are required in most U.S. states. It allows you to uncover current or previous issues that you cannot see in the property that the current homeowner, is aware of. They must be disclosed accurately at penalty of fraud or perjury and should be used heavily in post-offer negotiations. So what the seller disclosures are is usually each state has prepared their own form of things that the seller needs to disclose, whether or not they're aware of current or previous issues regarding the property. So that can range from anything from electrical issues to plumbing issues to drainage issues to flooding to meth and mold and infestations. It asks all kinds of questions of the seller. The seller has to fill those out and return them to you, the buyer, and then you will be required to fill out those seller disclosures when you sell your property and submit those to the buyer in a timely manner. Sometimes I can use information that I gather off those seller disclosures. Like they may say, yeah, we got a problem with the foundation. Well, there you go, right? You didn't even need the inspector to tell you that. The homeowner told you that. So that may not be something that was disclosed right away, but when you get the seller disclosures, because it's a more official document and they're at risk of a penalty of fraud or perjury by filling out that form, they're probably going to be more likely to be more honest in that form than they were just in your casual conversation with them. So use that information to go back and say, hey, look, you said in your seller disclosures that you've had that there's foundation issues. I didn't know that when I first offered you what I offered you. I still want the home, but I'm going to need you to drop the price by X amount, right, to cover fixing those issues. So again, most people, when you negotiate it in that way, most people are pretty open to the idea of, of course that's going to cost you a little extra, so we have to negotiate the price, massage the price a little bit. All right, so that covers our due diligence and analysis. Obviously very heavy on collecting information and basing your decision on purchasing the property and the price that you purchased that property at off of that decision. Important to remember, you make your money in fixing and flipping. You make your money when you buy. You've got to buy it right. You cash your check when you sell the property, but you make your money when you buy. And you do that by making sure that you've got all of your numbers very tight, that you know everything that's wrong with the property that you're going to have to fix and what the cost is, and knowing that you're going to go into it making that profit. The best way to mitigate risk in real estate is knowledge. And that's true on a large scale, your knowledge of strategies, and that's why you bought your education, so congratulations to you for that. But also on a small scale, on a property by property basis, you mitigate risk on each and every project by knowing exactly what's wrong with that property before you purchase it. That's why this due diligence and long analysis phase is so important. So do not make the mistake of taking this process lightly. It's very important in mitigating the risk for you and for your money partners. That wraps up Module 5. In the next module, we're going to be talking about funding, and funding particularly dealing with fix and flips. That will be Module 6. I'm looking forward to seeing you over there.